And basically what you're looking at is massive neuroplasticity, neurogenesis that's happening. And the brain is learning how to rewire itself in ways that it's like how the body naturally heals. And then to see 3 months after that, so there's no doubt looking at the post scans and even how the trauma patterns had resolved, like really immediately after Ibogaine. Mm-hmm. Some of the areas of deficit or overactivity in my brain were just clear. And then to see 3 months later how everything kind of reconfigured into a new normal, which was exactly what I was experiencing internally.
Hi, I'm Steve Saporin, and this is The Neuro's Journey. I'm here today with Leah Nix, a frequent guest on my podcast and in my bedroom. But seriously, we're sitting down here after her Ibogaine treatment to give you the full picture of what this journey actually looks like. It was 4 months ago, and Leah is uniquely positioned to talk about this. She experienced significant and violent childhood trauma. She lost a sister to heroin, has spent a decade as a licensed therapist. She's a trained psychedelic therapist, worked in commercial insurance, and now runs Delphi, a consulting firm helping governments and organizations bring psychedelics into the healthcare system. She's done an incredible amount of healing work and is continually on the growth edge. It's an honor to have her here, and that she's my fiance, and I love her so much. So I'm so happy to do this with her and live my purpose with the love of my life. So it's been 4 months since you went to Cancun. So who are you now compared to the woman that sat right there before the treatment?
Yeah. I would say that question is probably one of the most important in my life, meaning that the experience that I've had is most certainly an inflection point on my growth path. And I'm really excited for this conversation that I get to share about this journey and what it has meant for me, how I've experienced you in supporting me in this part of my growth, and how that's changed how I show up for my family, in my work, in my purpose. I can say that my internal experience is that of a more grounded, calm, and clear person than I was before. I've come into an awareness of the importance of alignment of energy in a way that I couldn't really access before. And what I mean by that is I was shown in working with Ibogaine how my energy from my trauma was being kind of pulled and dissipated in different ways that were about fear and about protection, and also shown that those patterns could be released. So, for example, my energy used to be really pulled strongly by how I could help other people and how I perceived that I could help other people, even if they weren't asking me to help them. So being useful to others was a way that I kept myself safe as a child. And that pattern was so strong that as an adult, what that looked like is paying more attention to other people's needs and preferences and what they might need and how I could help them than what was right for me. And just really centering in that and aligning my energy with my truth and what felt right for me. So before Ibogaine, before 4 months ago, I was in a pattern throughout my adulthood of really being in a lot of over functioning and, just energy going in many different directions at once, overworking, being always giving from a cup that was depleted. I was always giving from depletion, right? And that was my normal state. I thought that I had to feel depleted in order to feel like I was doing enough. That has changed radically for me. Like, I feel like I am really clear and focused on what is right for me, what is right for my family, what is right for the direction that I want to contribute in the world. And that is centered inside of myself. I do not feel distracted as I used to with solving other people's problems when they haven't asked me to help them. And it's been amazing. I feel well rested. I feel more joyful. I feel more calm and relaxed every day. And it's a place that I couldn't have known that this way of being was possible for me. I haven't really experienced it this way before. And that being quote unquote selfish is actually the way by which I will make the greatest impact in the world. What I've seen is that the world has responded to me very differently. And I think that we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the way that I'm being is actually kind of effortlessly increasing my ability to reach people and to have the impact that I would like to have. And I'm working less. I'm focusing more on my family. I feel so much more centered in nourishing my personal life than ever before. And I'm so grateful.
So a couple things. When you said that quote unquote selfish, our brother Omani Carson likes to say, be selfish to be selfless.
Yeah.
And I think it really kind of connects to the other point that kind of stood out to me in your answer, which was filling from this depleted cup. And, I think it's a real change of perspective to realize that filling our own cups is actually the greatest good. And so that means like reorganizing sort of life sometimes. I mean, I think both you and I used to just wake up and walk right into the office, or whatever kind of vibe, and just orienting around actually the way we can be, like the energetic presence that we're putting off and how we can show up. And that means sometimes, and I don't think it's selfish at all. I think it's actually like an act of love for yourself and for everybody. So, and we're both working on that. Doesn't happen every day, but I feel like we've made strides in that area of like recognizing that like dealing with ourselves is a priority.
100%.
So, you felt all these changes happening in you, and we've also done this process of now 3 brain scans, right? So before, directly after Ibogaine, and several months later, and we're 4 months later from the actual event now. So how did seeing, the scans on the screen actually change the relationship to your own healing?
Oh my gosh, that was a profound experience. It's something that I wish everybody could have. It was that profound. Seeing the pre-scans and having my internal experience of trauma and struggle validated by what was being shown was the beginning, right? And we looked at those brain scans before we saw the end brain scans, which we recently saw. And so that was the beginning of like this validation. Okay, so what you've experienced is showing up in your brain patterns, your difficulty producing speech, your hypervigilance with social safety and monitoring, right? All of that activity, and also some of the neurotransmitter depletion that I'm pretty certain I was overusing caffeine. to deal with what was an underlying depletion of my neurotransmitters. And then to see the process of what the brain looked like immediately after Ibogaine, and then 3 or 4 months later, right? 3 months later, I guess it would be. Basically, when you see what happens right after Ibogaine, it's as if you're watching the healing happen. Right? You can see all the neurotransmitters have been dramatically depleted. Of course they have, right? Because they've all been pushed out. And basically what you're looking at is massive neuroplasticity, neurogenesis that's happening. And the brain is learning how to rewire itself in ways that it's like how the body naturally heals. And then to see 3 months after that, so there's no doubt looking at the post scans and even how the trauma patterns had resolved, like really immediately after Ibogaine. Some of the areas of deficit or overactivity in my brain were just clear. And then to see 3 months later how everything kind of reconfigured into a new normal, which was exactly what I was experiencing internally. So during the phase of neurogenesis, I was struggling, as you know, like I experienced some what I call symptoms of neurogenesis, where I felt much slower in my cognition. I really just didn't feel like myself.
Do you define neurogenesis for?
Oh, definitely. That is when new neural pathways are being formed, and you're just having essentially brain growth.
Which uses a lot of energy.
A tremendous amount of energy. And also the brain is not working exactly as it has in the past. So the brain wants to find efficiency. So it's always trying to run on the same pathways that it has before, because that's most efficient. But when you introduce Ibogaine and other psychedelics, it disrupts that. And the brain has to find new pathways. Well, you can imagine this is like weed whacking through a jungle now for the brain, right? It's a little bit slower. It's forming new paths through this forest of web of neurons and things that we have. So I felt really slowed down. And that was shown in my what's called the alpha peak, is the what that how that is measured in the QEEG. So the normal range is 8 to 12 hertz of alpha peak. That's, how fast your brain processes information. I was over 11 and a half before. And then during, it dropped down to 10. And that was a huge change for me, for my brain to feel so slow and sluggish. But what was happening, and I'm so grateful that we had the doctors that we did involved, they helped me to understand, look, your brain is reconfiguring itself into something that is better for you. It is a process, and you're a very kind of cognitive person, and your body is starting to come online in terms of your somatic experience being more integrated into your awareness. And this is necessary. So 10 hertz is like a Goldilocks range where you actually have more access to the information that's coming from your body. So respect this. And that was helpful. And then as the healing process continued, my processing speed started to speed up again, right? And that's been reflected in the post scans. And also, I can hear my body informing me in ways that I couldn't hear before, in ways that was easy for me to ignore or to explain away. Because when you grow up in a household that is violent and you're physically at risk all the time, you necessarily have to learn to ignore your body's warning signals, or you're prioritizing very specific warning signals from your body. and then how to change your behavior. So it really becomes myopic in terms of how you're listening to your body. There's so much information that's trying to come through. So that's a big part of the change that's happened for me, is especially like when I'm making decisions, the message from my body is so clear that it makes the decision more clear and obvious, and not something that I can just like ignore or explain away or, write over with some rationale that my mind wants to make up.
So when you say messages from your body, how does that play out for you?
It's a brief intensifying of my awareness of my somatic experience such that I can connect it to what's happening in my mind or in the situation. So it's a reintegration of my body awareness and how my body is registering what is actually going on in the moment and how I feel about it. So this has been just an incredible thing. I recently had an experience where I needed to make a decision about like people in my life. And it was ultimately my body that made that decision. I could go through all the analysis and all the pros and cons and all that type of rationalization. And I am 100% sure that the previous me, the pre-Ibogaine me, would have ignored my body signals and made up a story as to why I was going to keep certain people in my life that were not really in my highest and best good, right? Which is a recapitulation of trauma, right? And those patterns then define our lives. And my body said, no. My body said, I don't feel comfortable. This is not right for me. And now that my mind is reconfigured in the ways that we saw in the brain scan, with my somatic experience coming online, I just had to listen. I didn't really have another choice except to really listen to that and choose from there. And so that's been amazing. And sitting there and looking at this on the computer screen couldn't have been more validating. Right? So when people have like open heart surgery or some kind of heart surgery, for example, they get to see the progress that they're making. Here's what's going on. This is all clogged up and blocked up and so forth. Now we've done the surgery. You're in an intense healing phase. Now on the other side, your heart's looking great, right? This is all opened up. We get that with other organs of our body, right? And the brain is the one organ that we can't actually physically, open up and take a look at. So the brain scans are as close as we get. What it said to me was, Leah, this is the experience of change that you're having is not a story that you are making up.
Yeah.
This is in full color, in many different angles of looking at the change that you're experiencing. It's real. You can trust it. So I really wish for everyone to be able to have that experience as they go through their own whatever neuro leadership, the term that you've used, whatever neuro leadership looks to them, and taking radical responsibility for their own nervous system health, their own brain health, to be able to visibly see and measure the changes in the brain is a tool and also just a gift. So, yeah.
Yeah, a few things there. Well, one, let's just give a little shout out or praise to NeuroGrove, who did these scans, 100%. Trista Miles and Dr. Ryan Phillips, who's been a guest on this podcast, and they really served our family well. And, just so everyone knows, this is not some hugely expensive intervention. You can get a QEEG scan for $500, $700. It's not some major outlay of money. And not only, I think, does it ratify the story of healing, but it also informs people how to tell you how to heal. I mean, psychiatry seems to be the only medical profession where we don't look at the organ in which they're treating. So, there's also a game plan established from those brain scans. What do you need? What IVs did you need? What neurofeedback was needed? So not only were they ratifying your story of your care, but they were informing your care so it was more effective.
100%.
Yeah.
And from what we saw at the post scans, like the neurofeedback, like really helped kind of lock things in, right? Helped me to achieve this new normal. So it was like I had these patterns that were me. Everything kind of got jumbled around in a healthy way in a little bit, and then kind of re-solidified in a new version, which has some of the, echoes, let's say, of some of the old patterns, but I feel so much more at choice. And that feeling of being at choice, being shown to me on the screen, there can be something ineffable about when you're having these internal changes and experiences and trying to explain to people what that's like. One of the things that I could say is many people who practice mindfulness and meditation would relate to this opportunity to have a pause in between when you have a experience and when you respond to it or react to it. Right?
Viktor Frankl call that the ultimate freedom, right? That choice between stimulus and response.
Yes. And so that has been opened, like the way that I think about it is like what used to be like a shorter window has been opened up. I feel like there's a ton of spaciousness when I'm experiencing things that might have like upset or triggered me in the past. There's just like a lot of room to look at and be at choice in how I want to respond to that. And so it's like this new ingrained type of mindfulness that feels much like I have much more agency, where before behaviors were being driven by unconscious and fearful behaviors.
22 veterans die by suicide every day. And in the next 60 seconds, I'm going to show you how you can help save one. Stanford found one Ibogaine treatment dropped suicidal thoughts in veterans from 47% to 7%. But it's illegal here. So our veterans are flying to Mexico on their own dime just to heal, and they're coming home to nothing. That's why Tony Glace is building One and Done, an integration center in Texas where couples heal together, where veterans aren't forgotten, where they finally get the thank you this country owes them. Ibogaine opens the door, integration walks you through it. And that's what One and Done does. Go to oneanddone.org and donate. Any amount helps. They served us, let's serve them back. oneanddone.org.
And another thing that comes to mind in looking at your scans is the importance of integration in this process, right? Because we saw this radical change in your brain, and it really got to like the Goldilocks areas and all the places, and then it moved kind of more towards how you were before, but with a lot of benefits, so that it was more like a aligned version of you. But, knowing that you went to our house in Frisco for 3 weeks, you stopped all substances for months, you changed your patterns a lot, you were really focused on making the most of this experience. And you can see how if someone didn't, their brain could go back. Right.
Yeah.
So you want to do this integration. That's why, our sponsor, One and Done, and Tony Glace in Texas is creating a place for veterans to come back and be able to integrate so that these changes become lasting. And I think like the scans for me also really reinforced it. like, yes, have this experience, but the medicine is just at your ability. It's a portal, and it's your choice to walk through it. You can just look at it and be like, it looks nice over there, but you could not do anything. Doing things will create the lasting change. And I feel like what I observed in you is a little bit of sense, am I losing like who I am, right? But what I've seen in this process is, no, you haven't lost. You just become a version of yourself that's less fearful.
Yeah.
You know, that like an upgraded version of the same you, not some different person. So it's, you know, you're not going to, if you're some super business person, you're not going to lose your edge. You're still going to be able to execute and do the big deals and all that. You're just going to be able to do it in a way where you're less taxing on all the people you work with, your family, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's really been a miraculous experience to see. And, you know, one thing that you mentioned, you said how difficult it is for you to speak. And I think anybody who listens to you, you're so articulate and you speak on stages all the time. Most people would be like, oh, it's hard for her to speak. And just to give people a bit of background, and something that we hold in common is we both had real difficulties speaking as children. Me with stuttering from my sexual abuser, and you kind of just becoming nearly mute to avoid, you know, any physical abuse in your house. And we both learned what you talked about, to override our body's signals. You know, I wanted to talk. I just couldn't. You know, I'm sure you wanted to talk, but you just you felt unsafe. And so it's a real testament to like who you are, that you now are not mute. I love the way you talk. And so happy to be the benefit of it. So, I wanted
can I say something about the integration piece?
Yeah.
I think that's really incredibly key with Ibogaine. So when we had heard, because we have access to, you know, world leading experts in Ibogaine therapy, and we had heard about how important the post-therapy integration period was, and giving myself a lot of spaciousness to allow that to unfold. So that's where we set up, where I went 2 weeks, you know, up to the mountains after that. And Tony Glace of One and Done had brought this concept forward to say, hey, look, veterans need to have this time after their Ibogaine to really do this integration work and have it be really protected and held in the right container with the right therapies and the right people who are, you know, able to support that process. I could not be more committed to that form of care around Ibogaine after going through the experience that I've had. The period of neurogenesis that happens after is a incredible opportunity. And there's also risks to falling back into old patterns, or just not having that be optimal without the right support. I don't know how I would have done it if I wouldn't have had your support and the support of all of the experts that we have, and my team at Delphi, who really carried me while I was in a time of deficit. I couldn't function at the way that I typically do, and they just showed up, and so I felt so held. And I feel like this is my experience, that is directly correlated to the lasting positive outcomes that I'm having and that we saw in my brain scans. So I am, you know, really committed to the one and done model being something that becomes standard, a standard of care for this therapy, and the way that we work with this medicine, understand how it fits within the healthcare system, the integration piece being absolutely essential to the outcomes. So I just wanted to mention that. And one other thing, you know, I feel like there might be some people watching. You had said earlier that the QEEG brain scans are like $500 to $700, and maybe that, doesn't seem like a lot of money. I think to some people that sounds like a lot of money. The point being that if you are going to be investing in these treatments or really investing in your path to healing and greater wholeness, which I'm so grateful that I'm experiencing that, you're going to make the decision to take radical responsibility for that and explore many different pathways, many of which you talk about on this podcast, that finding a way, either through asking your employer, seeing if it's covered through health insurance, saving up, whatever it might be, to get the brain scan, can really help you understand more clearly what it is that you're dealing with and how to target the interventions that you might choose for yourself. So just starting there. So if you're going to make the investment in healing, that outlay is something to really be considered as part of the process. So I just want to acknowledge that, because I think we're in a different position where $500 or $700 maybe doesn't sound like a lot to us, but there are a lot of people out there, all of whom, every single human, who deserve to have healing, who might feel like that amount, is something significant.
Yeah, and what comes to mind also on the integration part is, I think it creates a sense of agency in this process for the person, right? Especially our culture. I think we let's take a pill that fixes us, and then you didn't do anything in that process. But when you integrate and you actually do all the work, what you're really acknowledging is the medicine. People like to say it's like a fresh snow, right? You can, you've had these well-worn paths in your brain, maybe they're addiction or fear or whatever, and they're not serving you anymore. And it snows, and now you can choose new paths. But you still have to make that choice and do it. And I think when you actually dedicate yourself to doing things, I like the framework, curiosity, courage, and action. Action tells yourself that you're in control of this process, that you're doing. The medicine was a helpful intervention for you to be successful in changing your life. And, in the way that I experienced this with you and seeing it, it's really what you've done after, which has been a radically different way of living than it was before. And then, one other thing, I'll just bring this up since we're here. One difference that you are living is you actually got your ring size. You got your ring. So we got to joke about that on our first podcast together, and we got 2 people send us ring sizers. So that's happened. It feels really good. Yeah,
and I love it so much, and that it was so sweet that our community showed up for us in that way to send us ring sizers so I could get my engagement ring. And, as honey, like, it was your idea. You chose a particular type of stone. You chose what's called a salt and pepper diamond, but it's a diamond that intentionally has coal in it. And we both have the experience in our lives of being like on the wounded healer path. And so acknowledging like the beauty of all the painful things that we've been through, in that as we heal them, we're able to emerge more beautiful and more able to help others and be in service and contribution to others. And so that it touches me every time when I look at my ring that you gave me, and that was your thought and intention behind what you chose to be a reflection of who we are. It really means a lot to me. That's a deep truth that we get to carry together and hopefully inspire other people to consider that for themselves, that the hard things that they've been given are actually the way that they become extraordinarily beautiful. And Yeah.
Yeah, and I like, when I was thinking about it, and what I liked about it was, you could look at it like, oh, maybe we did all this healing trauma and there's no more flex in there. But really what we're saying is, like, no, like, we're not like that hasn't disappeared. We have worked with it in a certain way so it becomes part of our beauty instead of what's undermining us with addiction or workaholism or whatever else we have going on. So it's not rejecting your past. It's acknowledging that it's an integral part of it. And the reality is that's how diamonds are. They just find certain ones that don't have those flecks in them, but that's how diamonds are made. So it's a real diamond, and yeah, I'm glad it landed on you well. I was a little worried about it, honestly.
It's so perfect. It's my Wonder Woman ring.
Well, this is a good sort of segue to my next question, because you've described yourself as having avoidant attachment, and you might maybe define that for people. And even though you were kind of aware of it, even though you knew the fear behind those thoughts wasn't really real, like you weren't even bringing it up to me in the more recent times, it still kept showing up for you, right? And so can you explain how that pattern has been impacted by your work with Ibogaine at Beyond?
Yeah. Attachment styles are developed very early in life, and they have to do with our primary attachment to our parents, often to our mother, can also be to our father. And they essentially, at the root of it, it's about trust. And can I trust other people, right? That pattern is deeply ingrained in us. And in my situation, I developed, understandably so, a fear-based attachment style. That is, there's a variety of them, but not a secure attachment style, a fear-based attachment style that is avoidant. Meaning that when there is a signal, when there's a perceived signal that the person is going to not be trustworthy or to harm you, the answer to find safety, because that's always what it's going to be about, is how do I keep myself safe and alive, right? Is to leave. And so for someone with an avoidant attachment style, and this was my experience, there can often be a script running in the background of, I might have to leave. I think I might have to leave. Is that a sign I have to leave? Is that a sign I have to leave? Right? And so you're always kind of preparing to leave
or be left, maybe.
The abandonment is happening in the relational experience.
Okay.
Yeah. So anxious attachment is more characterized by the worry that you'll be left, where a person then clings to someone. Right? You're going to leave me. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. That's more of an anxious attachment style. And my avoidant is more like, oh, I'm not going to fully trust you.
Sure.
So that I can leave if I have to leave. When you show me that you're an unsafe person, because my history tells me that people are unsafe and they're going to hurt me. And you're probably not any different than that. And so through our work together, which has been such a blessing in my life, I was able to become more and more conscious of that avoidant attachment style operating and it being irrational. And I would even bring, I've shared with you openly that, I'm having like those thoughts again. They aren't based in any reality of what's going on. But it's coming up and I can't really stop it. And it's just something I have to deal with. And I can't really remember having any of those types of thoughts since working with Ibogaine.
Okay, so this is 4 months, and how
Yeah.
often do those thoughts come prior to Ibogaine?
Regularly.
Like weekly?
Sure,
Okay.
weekly.
So none in 4 months or weekly for your previous life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it really couples well with all of this, like, just overall reduction in fear and fear-based reaction. I shared with you before that immediately after Ibogaine, one of the things that I experienced that was quite distinct is an inability to worry. My mind, and apparently my brain, what was going on, would not allow me to entertain worrisome thoughts. Like, it just seemed irrational.
That is amazing. I mean, imagine that, America, the world, the inability to worry. I mean, did you worry before?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. And it affected my well-being. It affected our relationship. Because, the avoidant attachment is a form of worry. Mm-hmm. You are going to hurt me. I'm going to have to leave. Like, that's a serious worry. And it's just kind of become like, if worrisome thoughts come up, they're kind of put in their proper place. Like, a little bit of self-compassion, but also not going down that rabbit hole of things that can't be controlled. There's, this drive for certainty that humans have. And that's a sure way to misery. And I think one of the inscriptions in the temple at Delphi in Greece is certainty brings insanity. So chasing certainty and ways of ourselves for feeling certain just to feel more safe and secure actually leads to us being unwell. Mm-hmm. So the need for certainty just is not, it's the best way that I can say it is that it is not interesting like it used to be. Yeah. It's not something to really pay much attention to. What's to pay attention to is what's going on for real, what's really happening, and be super curious about that.
Right.
Yeah. So that's actually, now that we're saying it right now in this moment, curiosity has been increased. The capacity for curiosity. Because once you're in a fear-based reaction, you're not in curiosity anymore. You're in survival, right? Not curious. I'm unsafe. I've got to do something about it. But when you feel like you're not under threat, you can relax and go, this is interesting. What's this about? Right? And it's surprising how little time all of that takes. All of these things can happen in like microseconds. Mm-hmm. And it radically changes the way that you're showing up in life, the way that you're engaging. I'll speak for myself, the way that I'm engaging, the decisions that I'm making, and how life and other people are responding to me. I used to struggle with stage fright, a lot. Like the struggle was very real. And I've recently had some opportunities to be on stage, and it was so much fun. There was no stage fright at all, because I was just having a conversation with the people in the room. And it felt like the most natural thing. It didn't matter if there were, 200 people or 2 people or 1 person. It didn't matter. And so there's just an overall quieting in my system that is allowing me to be more fully me, be more curious about life. And when I was in that period of neurogenesis, I'll just say this really quickly, that because I was disoriented in myself in terms of I don't feel like myself. My brain is working really much more slowly, but I still had to return to work during that time. And so I'm interacting with clients or potential clients or other partners. And I noticed that people were responding to me differently. And that gave me a sense of hope. That gave me a sense of, okay, something positive is happening here because people actually are opening up more. You can imagine someone who's very cognitive and very quick can come into a conversation and have a certain kind of intensity that can actually shut other people down and reduce the kind of creative, co-creative energy in a conversation.
Right.
And then you come into a conversation slower, more embodied. It leaves space for other people. And that was a really cool experience and something that I'm trying to remember now as, you know, as my kind of natural tendencies have come back online a bit more, is to allow space for other people. Be in myself, like let other people show up, and you don't have to be so quick and snappy and, you know, all of that all the time. Just enjoy in oneself and therefore infuse into the interaction spaciousness and a sense of relaxation and calm, which almost every significant conversation can be had in that way. So, just, you know, those kind of little rabbit holes, but they're important to me.
Oh, well, this show's all about rabbit holes. So I'll go down one. Just, you know, I want to, the way I'm taking this and from seeing the brain scans and what you were saying, it's a more efficient use of the brain, right? And so, like, the last thing we would want to become is fearless and have no worry. Like, there's an appropriate, like, things that are real. We would worry about just for the portion of how do I generate action to deal with a real threat. Like, how do I, you know, make sure I don't walk off the sidewalk and get hit by a bus? I need to have some fear and I need to, like, look around and analyze things, but to the degree that it's appropriate given the circumstances.
Correct.
And so what I hear from you is that there's a lot less wasted energy on fear of fear, basically. Fear of something that's not really dangerous.
100%. I feel like our systems are really well attuned to perceived threat. And if we're not overlaying them with misperceptions from things that have happened in the past but aren't really happening in the present, we're really just paying attention to what's happening in the present in a more neutral way, we are more able to trust our assessment that what's happening does need our attention and our action, and to choose our response to that. My experience has been, because I had a lot of fearful and scary things that happened in the past, and those getting overlaid onto what's happening in the present, it would be confusing. Can I trust that this is a threat? I'm not sure. And that's where the overthinking, instead of just like, no, you know, this isn't quite right and needs to be addressed in some fashion, and feeling more centered and clear in that and less confused.
Yeah, and I've seen that happen and play out with you in a work situation where you were able to analyze it, decide to move in another direction, not have, you know, feel good about it, think about it, I think, an appropriate amount. It was a big decision. And I also want to circle back because, you know, we started this whole thing about avoidant attachment and we kind of drifted off a little bit, but actually in the relationship without avoidant, these avoidant thoughts that you say have happened.
Yeah.
What is your experience of, you know, and our relationship was good before this. So, like, what's your experience now?
greater intimacy. So when there's an underlying attachment, fearful attachment style, you cannot fully relax and trust. That's too dangerous. And then when that's resolved, you can reach deeper layers of connection and closeness that weren't accessible before, because you're, on guard. And then, that becomes pointless. And how good the deeper connection and the greater intimacy feels, and the relaxation into that becomes so much more compelling. Oh, this is the good stuff. And we've been talking about this recently, that really is happening in our relationship. That there's been this deepening of our connection and all of the beauty that comes from that on the daily basis, how much we're in joyful, loving connection with one another. And the level of attunement and happiness and creativity that we get to experience because of the connection that we have. I do attribute it as far as what I have responsibility over. I absolutely do attribute this work with Ibogaine to allowing me in such a short amount of time to have access to these greater levels of connection. I was a person who struggled with connection a lot. One of these people who on the surface everyone would see as being super loving and open and warm. But inside, I always had barriers and guardrails up to keep myself safe. And that's just really falling away. It's like barriers and guardrails for what? They don't feel needed. They don't feel necessary. They don't make sense to me. And so it's like opening or removing a gate and walking out barefoot, maybe for the first time, into a field of soft green grass. And you feel that, and it feels so natural and normal and healthy. And you know that you're on the right path.
It's interesting. One thing that comes to mind when you say that is, the deepening of the relationship. And I feel like, my experience of it, I think in the past would have been, we're in this great spot. Don't fuck it up. And really, before I even knew of my trauma or what trauma was or any of it, I was orienting around, if I could just get these sensations to fucking stop, I could relax. And I thought then nothing would be, then I could just live this kind of happier life. But when that actually happened, I oriented around now that this is just an endless thing. Again, a shout out to Amani. He talks about the past being bedrock and the future being clay that we can mold. But living in the present moment is all you can live in. And so you can constantly, it's until the day that we die that I hope our relationship becomes deeper and deeper. And I think that's a real sort of potential, and it's so fun to be on this path with you.
Yes. Well, I feel like that's a super important key to something that this experience with me going through Ibogaine has to show. So, I was trained as a family therapist, practiced as a family therapist, and the best case scenario is not when one person changes in the family or in the couple. It's when everybody changes. Right? You're allowed to help each other evolve, or you're evolving in a healthy way based on the changes that another person is making, or how you want to show up for your partner or your family member. So that's the best case scenario, because that means that you're changing and you're growing together. Mm-hmm. I couldn't have had a more profound experience of that with you in supporting me through Ibogaine, and how you showed up for me, and how I observed you doing your growth work in yourself on the daily, and then how you were showing up in relationship with me. So we were both growing together. It wasn't like, oh, okay, Leah's going to go off and do Ibogaine, and she's going to change, and she's going to, become renewed and different in some ways, and that's all her, and I'm just going to, keep doing my thing. It was super engaged and co-creative. Mm. And I think that really set the foundation for that intimacy to grow throughout that our experience, because you are also, meeting me in this co-creation. Like we're doing it together. We're growing and evolving together. And part of that is how you're supporting me, mm-hmm. right? And how we're supporting each other. As the opportunity for other people to have access to Ibogaine, grows, I feel like that's a really important piece, that spouses and family members who are supporting someone through Ibogaine, many of whom will have some very serious things that are going on. It's not just that person is going off to change themselves and fix themselves. No, this is an opportunity for everyone to evolve and to grow past old hurts and old fears and become a more whole and connected version of themselves. So I'm really hopeful about that, and I'm eager for people watching to understand that has been the experience that I have had with your support.
A really important realization to have, I think, in that process to be supportive is that I am fully responsible for my experience and my actions. Mm. And so it's when you take that, instead of saying Leah did this or Leah, whatever it is, it's this look inward. Well, why is what Leah's doing or whoever's doing it, why am I acting this way? Why is this happening? And so I think that responsibility is also a total freedom, right? Because then nobody else is impacting you and creating all this negativity, and they did this to me and that should have happened. No, it's like, oh, well, how am I acting? What is happening in the world. And also on the other part, it's really helpful to be supportive, because I have this time period in my life. What has happened is my nervous system has calmed down radically. A power source that I relied on for my entire life, which is like an amped up, traumatized nervous system, is now pretty much gone. And I have had a lessening of that energy, and I'm trying to figure out this new world. And really some things that have come in is more bouts of depression, where I've gotten low energy. But what I've noticed is even in those times when I'm not feeling so well, if something's happening with you, I can easily switch out of my world and support you, because I'm not
being like, oh, man, why do I have to deal with, like everybody's always bummed out around here, whatever, kind of thing. Like if you need support, I can just be like, oh, okay. Like, and it's easy. So it's been really helpful as I go through this, and you, the same, you have comforted me, and none of these thoughts to me, it doesn't feel real. None of it feels real. It feels like, okay, this is my system. I need to work with it a little bit. There's nothing out there. I mean, everything is so great in my life. So, and that said, I've had more frequent short bouts of depression or down mood than I have probably ever had, at least in frequency.
Yeah.
And I'm working with it, and that's sort of that's sort of part of it. But to be able to feel that even in the depth of that, I can almost immediately switch into being helpful if that's needed. And I think there's some benefit, there's some relationship to taking responsibility for my own experience that allows me to do that.
Yeah. Well,
hey, quick pause before we keep going. If this conversation is landing with you, become part of the Neuro's Journey community by subscribing and following along for more stories like this of courage and the science of healing. I'd love for you to drop a comment below and share what part of the episode hit home for you.
If I can offer something, because I've witnessed all this, and one of the things that I perceive, in addition to you being more aware of your depressive states, is that's also come with greater self-compassion. So before, it was more nebulous, where your levels were off and maybe your energy was very low and you needed to kind of sequester yourself from other people and
rom-com time.
Yes, and just like create this protective bubble around you, and you really couldn't be accessed at that time. And also you weren't really maybe fully able to acknowledge that you were hurting. Now I see you as you have these kind of bouts, like acknowledging that it's happening, accepting help. And in that acknowledgement, I perceive greater self-compassion. Like, oh, this is something that I'm going through right now. Like, oh, you're right. And being with yourself in that way, even when it's hard, but just at least more acknowledgement for your own struggle. So yeah, there's something that's more, let's say, coherent about that way of showing up versus just this nebulous, I have to tune out, I have to drug myself, I have to just escape these feelings that I'm having, and avoid them, to I'm having these feelings, I'm acknowledging it, it really sucks, but I'm present with it and I'm talking about it. Like that was something that was really different, is you used to like verbally shut down and be inaccessible and be kind of like a bit angry if people tried to access you in any way, even to offer you help. And now that's very different. You're verbal, I'm having this experience, I'm feeling really down. Sometimes you're apologetic about it, which of course is not necessary, but common. And to experience like being offered and receiving support as like a good thing that you deserve, that you, it's a time when you can let in love in a new way, a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a helpful thing in that process is the framing of the life in the hero's journey. Because, we are both trying to do big things in the world. We're trying to serve a lot of people in the millions. And that, and that is, comes with a lot of
struggles and a lot of things to overcome. And so I can give myself compassion because I know my history and I know why particular ways of showing up are challenging for me. And I can look at it and I can say, okay, I'm in that part that is part of it, right? This is
right.
The nature of trying to do something big and be vulnerable and be of service in a way that you put yourself out there and people can reject or, whatever they want to do for it. So that framing is really helpful, and just acknowledging the reality of what the circumstances are and not needing to sort of change it to fit my fear profile. I can't be like this because, so I'll try to make it different. We're talking about it as we are serving your brother Justin and trying to be of service to him, right?
Yeah.
And, having been a drug addict and understanding that a little better than you do with that experience, I think a way that I showed up that I'm proud of and was beneficial was just to communicate to Leah, like this cat's not a CEO today.
Yeah.
And this is kind of how it's going to roll, and exactly what's happening is exactly how it is the only way it could play out. And he's doing incredibly. But I think that there is some of that. I'll just keep calling back to all the people that have been on the show. But Ravain Bacall, who's an upcoming guest and my men's group leader, basically, characterizes suffering as fighting with reality. And so, the circumstance that we're going through with, basically getting Justin to the portal so that he can walk through it is uncertain. It's frustrating at times. It's incredibly uplifting, and it's really a joy in my life. I feel so good about it. But it also is a very specific thing that's going to go how it's going to go, and we can't control that. We can control how we operate in it.
Yeah. And so all of those things that you said are true about my brother. Just reflecting back on your process, what I hear you saying is like feeling like you're more at choice in how you show up, and the framing of the experiences that you're having as valuable and important to your hero's journey, right? Puts them in their proper place and makes us, and I can relate to this, makes us more capable helpers for other people. And, in the circumstance with my brother, which I know we're going to talk about more, your experiences with heavy drug use, which I haven't had, have been like instrumental in helping me to accurately perceive what's going on, because the situation is fraught with a long history of, fearful things happening, and, past behaviors and, baggage and upon baggage that I bring into the dynamic. And what your perspective has helped me so much with is stepping into that co-creation with my brother in the present moment, which is the greatest service that we can give to others who we're trying to help. Your awareness is just having this kind of profound effect in your own life and our relationship, and then how that's rippling out into our family.
Yeah, and maybe we could even reframe that, that we're trying to help in the context of the hero's journey. What we're trying to be is really good allies.
Yeah.
So, and to give Justin support to help himself.
100%.
He is going to help himself, and I feel confident in it, as much as one can be in this circumstance. Just so people know, Justin has been on the streets and living on the streets, and has had a lot of issues with drug addiction, and he has committed to kind of change some of his behavior patterns, and we're helping him get to the point where he can take Ibogaine himself. And yeah, it's been an amazing expression of our purpose in real life. I mean, talking to the camera and consulting governments and all that is one thing, but like helping your brother-in-law out is a different thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. And it's I mean, everybody should have a former drug addict in their family, because I can really help out with certain perspectives here that you might not have access to.
It's true. It's really true. And my brother has said essentially that. Mm-hmm. That the way that you have been intervening has allowed him to help himself in ways that, it's like that support under, like it's been like an uplifting thing versus someone coming in and saying, you have to do this and you have to do that if you want XYZ, which is like a domination and control thing, which, often happens in these dynamics. So,
which like exacerbates their shame. And so, the way that we're looking at it, right, is we want to be the best allies possible in this situation. We can't determine what the hero does with our allyship.
Right.
And no matter how it goes, at least at this point, I think we can both say we stepped up, we offered what we could offer, and it feels like an incredible thing and such a just beautiful thing to do with you, and and really feel it. I feel like kicking off 2026 with this is an amazing experience. I'm so blessed to have it with you. And so we've talked a lot about personal life here. How has this experience changed you and your professional capacity and work life?
Yeah. So as I said, I feel like there's been this crystallizing of my energy in alignment with my determination of what's right for me versus kind of scanning the horizon for what other people need and directing my energy towards that. There's like this kind of pulling back into myself, bringing my energy back into myself, and then making my decisions and choosing my actions from a place of this is what actually makes me feel well. My wellness is aligned now with the work that I'm doing in the world in a way that it was not before when I was operating from depletion.
And so you've started IHPI. Explain what that is and how. I mean, so specifically the details of your work, not just the way you're showing up for people, but things have changed there. So explain what IHPI is, Ibogaine Healthcare Policy Institute, I think.
Yes, that's you got it. So that's a really good example of what happens when you kind of pull in and you start to condense your energies and your efforts into like more targeted answers or process for your contribution. So pretty soon after I did my Ibogaine treatment, it became clear that this medicine deserves special focus to help facilitate it into the healthcare systems. And there is what many people wouldn't realize is that there is a chasm between research and FDA approval and actually having the treatment available and covered by insurance in the healthcare system, which is where all the good is actually realized.
This is an important point for a layperson to understand. As somebody, I thought when the drug gets approved, it's just on, but that's not true at all. And you operate in that world, kind of between FDA approval and all that, into getting it into the medical system. Right?
Exactly. And that what you just said is especially true in terms of it's not a foregone conclusion that it will be accessible in the healthcare system when it is a drug therapy combination like Ibogaine and other psychedelic therapies. The level of complexity is hard for the system to adapt to. So it needs a specific type of intervention for the decision makers in the healthcare system, in regulatory bodies, in the payer system to understand why it, first and foremost, why it is in their best interest to even focus on this, right? Even dedicate the resources that it will take to make decisions about Ibogaine. Then to have the information that they need in the way that they need it in order to make those decisions. This is very, it gets pretty technical, as you can imagine, right? And I like to kind of very much shorthand it by saying the legal, moral, financial trifecta needs to be brought to these decision makers in very specific ways with very specific data points. So that's what we specialize in, and we decided that setting up a policy institute specifically to facilitate Ibogaine in this way was the right thing to do. We announced it in November, which included me sharing about my Ibogaine experience and why I think it is a very good fit for the healthcare system, why I think it's important. And the response has been tremendous. So I brought the idea to some very significant players. So the former Assistant Secretary of Health, a former White House advisor on substance abuse, a former director for the entire substance use disorder division of the third largest payer in the country. And all of them in the very first conversation said, yes, absolutely. I'm on board. This needs to happen. How can I help?
And they're all your advisors.
And they have become the founding.
Who are
yes.
these two?
Yeah. So the former Assistant Secretary of Health is Dr. Leith States. The former White House advisor on substance use is Andrea Barthwell, who was also the person who got the FDA to start studying Ibogaine. And the director of Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield's, now Elevance Blue Cross Blue Shield's substance use disorder services is Eric Bailey. And we also have Dr. Ken Tupper, who is was with the Ministry of Health in Canada. So since we've started IHPI, we've had projects approach us in multiple jurisdictions. In the US, both in the healthcare system, also Native American reservations, in Canada, with a large healthcare system in Canada, in Puerto Rico, and then of course we have a significant policy platform in Europe, which at the right time will use that platform to help move this medicine forward there.
Amazing. And as a layperson, it seems like Ibogaine, it perfectly fits in the current rehab model, right? Because you have this extreme neurogenesis, which lasts about a month, right? People could come in there, even, without withdrawals. They could do an Ibogaine treatment relatively early in. They could integrate in a system that is already set up and that honestly has atrocious results.
Yeah.
I have a friend that has been to rehab over 40 times,
Yeah.
That's not an effective treatment.
Right.
So, and hopefully we can get those people to understand that repeat business is not the model. It's really helping people. And so I'm very hopeful. To me, it seems like the best way to do it, kind of forced integration with experts in it, where somebody would be there after so they could do the treatment. And I understand I'm just, shooting my mouth up here. I'm not an expert. But it does feel like that just could be a revolution and would fit in something that's already set up and they know how to do it and, it could work.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't call it forced integration. I mean, it's all obviously going to be voluntary. But the difference is, and maybe something that we can do is just link that 20-minute launch video that we did for IHPI, which really explains in pretty precise detail, like why this Ibogaine is a good fit for the healthcare system.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
Great. And with Ibogaine, you have this incredible combination of a medical intervention, like a surgery, an allopathic medicine intervention, where someone is taking a drug in a medicalized context that is creating some significant changes in the brain. And then you have a behavioral health container, which is helping to lock those changes in, right, to health and to healing, to a new way of being. So that combination works really well in the system that we already have. We have an extensive network of residential treatment centers that could be bringing in and working with people who have just had Ibogaine. And so the interventions that they're offering to help support change actually take hold.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great program, and it is another benefit of Ibogaine in this process, which I see as a real weakness, or just maybe not weakness, but something that really needs to be monitored and overcome in psychedelics generally, is if you put someone under MDMA or psilocybin or those other things, what's being released in the brain can also create sort of like a guru relationship with the person that is the therapist. And the way that I understand it is Ibogaine doesn't impact those brain centers, so you have just less risk of unethical behavior by practitioners.
Yeah, so Ibogaine is unique from many of the other psychedelics in that it does not cause a flood of oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone, chemical, and so that when you're in the experience, the doctors and the nurses are just like doctors and nurses in any other context.
Right.
There's not, and I've worked with other psychedelics, of course, in therapeutic settings, and there's this tendency to be, really aggrandizing the treatment provider in ways that are probably inappropriate. That aggrandizement leaves a person vulnerable to boundary violations.
Yes.
And sometimes if people with particular types of trauma will even welcome and try to create those boundary violations in the context of that flood of oxytocin. So that has been a clinical safety issue in the field of psychedelics that's known, that needs to be really skillfully handled. Ibogaine is different in that you're not going to let anybody treat you differently than you would if you weren't on the drug. You definitely need help, but you're also, the ego is still very much intact, and you're still very much yourself. So there's a safety that is built in to this medicine in that way.
Yeah, and I think that's a real thing to overcome with the traditional psychedelics, because when you're saying the boundary violations potential is real, you need experienced, ethical providers. The other psychedelics are very valuable. We're not saying that,
absolutely,
that they're not. They just have this extra potential risk that needs to be addressed. And so that, to me, if we're talking about doing millions of these treatments, you need hundreds of thousands potentially of ethical, well-trained psychedelic therapists who, have board sort of, whatever it is to certify them. And even then, in that context, as we do with all those things, you will still have some bad actors. And like you say, not only are the people vulnerable to it, but they might even want it. They might encourage it. So, we're in this spot of what's going to be the initial push into mass adoption in psychedelics. And it seems to me, as a layperson, that Ibogaine makes a lot of sense for that to be the first one. And you've experienced the medicine personally. You're on those front lines of trying to make all this happen. So what do you think happens when these medicines are available to everybody that needs them? What happens to the world?
Yeah, well, just to be clear, based on the timelines of when different drugs are going through the FDA, it's more likely that another drug will actually be first in terms of FDA approval, like a psilocybin-based drug. Ibogaine's a few years behind that, but it's on track. And what
has it received breakthrough status yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. That's what Brian Hubbard and Rick Perry are working on, right? That's one of the... Yeah. Okay.
There will be many different avenues and ways that we try to I should say other people in Ibogaine, like Brian Hubbard and former Governor Rick Perry, who are with the Americans for Ibogaine initiative, very important initiative that's focused on moving legislation and accelerating regulatory processes. So we really respect and support their work greatly.
And we'll put the link to Americans for Ibogaine's in the show notes. Very worthy thing to donate to. Leah and I donate to them. And it's a cause worth donating to if you have some extra scratch.
100%. And so that question about what happens when this is accessible at scale, and I'd say that's like I imagine that in my mind's eye and in my heart, and it is a guiding beacon for me, like that feeling of what it will be like when there is an answer to addiction and PTSD and many of the things that are driven by trauma, where there just hasn't been. And my family has gone through just tremendous suffering relative to these conditions and these ways of trying to cope with trauma. The first thing that I perceive will happen is there will necessarily need to be a change in perception around that what we're doing in mental health treatment is managing symptoms, trying to improve functioning by managing symptoms. Mm-hmm. We're on the precipice of a new paradigm where we're not just managing symptoms, but we're working towards resolving not just the symptoms, which addiction is largely a symptom, resolving the underlying issues that are driving the behaviors. People used to die of cancer. If you got a cancer diagnosis, it was basically a death sentence.
I know my mom died of it.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that, honey. And that was, that's how it was. There was a huge amount of money put into solving. Remember, there's the war on cancer. Mm-hmm. We've got to solve this. Too many people are dying. And now, people get cancer diagnoses diagnoses all the time and live. It is not a death sentence to get a cancer diagnosis. Same with HIV.
Absolutely.
This is the opportunity now that we have with Ibogaine and addiction.
And it's interesting because you say like the treating the symptom. I mean, what you're really saying when you're saying treat addiction is treat trauma. I mean, the stats are, it's basically 100% of people who become addicts the way that I did, your brother did, heavy alcoholics, they had trauma, and so what we're saying is really what we're treating is the underlying trauma, and we're getting the brain back in a space where people can change.
Yeah.
And it will have massive effects on the world.
Massive effects on the world, if it's allowed to become accessible, right? So this is what we're working on, and this is what we're assuming we're going to be able to accomplish. So what we could extrapolate from the change that one person might have, and that I've shared a bit about my experience. If you can imagine someone going from deep addiction and now their brain is reset so that they can be operating not from a fearful place, not from trauma, not from addictive patterns, showing up radically different in their life. And that's just one person. Collectively, we start to see a reduction in all different forms of suffering that stem from trauma and addiction. And intergenerationally, you start to see less trauma overall. So hurt people, right? When you remove the addiction, how is a person showing up differently as a parent? How are they showing up differently as a coworker or a boss? Radically differently.
Or how are they no longer using up tons of government services and things, and they all of a sudden become productive members of society who are like giving to the pie? I mean, there's so many ramifications from government funding to the way people feel to students. I think that I was a very troubled student, and I was always, Steve has so much potential, and my dad was a veteran and didn't have, the opportunity to get access to Ibogaine, and things could have been different in our family. But if you look at all the different ways it ripples out, and then I become a fucking lunatic, right? And I'm driving all the things, it's an incredible moment in history that we are about to make happen. It's going to happen. I know it's been fraught, but I'm just holding it like that because I believe in you and I believe in the people involved. And as we start to talk about it more, that's why it's so important for people to share this podcast, like, subscribe, like all those things, so people can understand. Hopefully we're going to be able to tell, well, not hopefully, we are going to tell the story of our allyship to Justin.
Yeah.
And we're hopeful that end is something where people can say, look, this is a very difficult case. This is, what people fear for themselves, that they're going to end up homeless, without a house, living in a car in Michigan, physically addicted to drugs. I mean, I was never there. I mean, I was a drug addict, but I was also successful, and I lived in a penthouse and all that. It was a different sort of animal, but, we will tell that story. And what an experience that we're also getting to tell Justin, to say, like, look, man, not only is this, potentially healing your life, but we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And you can be somebody that tells people that anybody can change. These veterans that we've seen, these incredible results from, these are people that have experienced the worst kinds of trauma and traumatic brain injury. And when we talk about fear, watch your best friend get shot in the face next to you, like that's going to generate some fear. And you see these remarkable results. And it is, like you said to me early on,
that it was a moral imperative for you to do this work when you have that kind of healing. And I think the more people can know what's possible, know that their loved ones themselves. I mean, to feel the way that I feel in my body, and I haven't done Ibogaine yet, and I intend to, but just to know the level of energy that I am not wasting now.
Yeah.
On being drunk and getting this and getting that and hungover and all this kind of stuff. It just allows me to be effective in a way that is a lot more powerful. And so you're going to unleash millions of people potentially if we can get this done. And the ripple effect is going to be, potentially a society that people did not even think was possible.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really play this out and you don't want to just let yourself sound fantastical, this could create utopian experience in the world where people get trauma, experience it, start on the addictive path, can head it off earlier. There's millions of people that are now productive and giving back. It's my experience that nearly everybody I know that has had these experiences that comes back from them wants to help people.
Yeah.
So now you're going to turn people who are, when you're a drug addict, you're selfish. You're thinking about yourself. You steal. You need, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's the experience then. But when you get purpose, you're thinking about the greater world. So if you just take 1 million people in a 350 million person country and you take them from being selfish to being selfless to being counterproductive to being productive, those changes could create a society that we only thought we could dream of.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's true. And one of the interesting things about this medicine is that it's very grounding. Mm-hmm. And so my mind doesn't go to utopian society. My mind goes to things just working better. Mm-hmm. And understanding some of the things that you're saying in terms of the neurobiology of that is, there are so many people who are in fear and in suffering and in pain. And that means that much of their brain is overactive in the midbrain region and the brainstem. Oh. And that means that energy is not as available for the prefrontal cortex, which is where our creativity and our planning and problem solving and all of that reside. Once you resolve the trauma and reduce the fear, all of that energy that was being overconsumed in the midbrain region and the brainstem now starts to flow into the prefrontal cortex. And people become more creative, more productive. That ripples out into society in mass. Mm-hmm. We know, this has been studied. The numbers are pretty consistent that if someone having a mental illness correlates to a 13% reduction in productivity, that's just one metric, for themselves and for their family members. Mm. Yes. And so when I say that this changes, there's a ripple effect and the whole system changes. When one person changes, that is what happens. So someone they're not radiating fear out into their family and to the other relationships that they're touching, right? They're creating generative, healthy relationships. Now the people around them are more healthy and more generative and have more energy flowing to their prefrontal cortex and not caught up in fear.
We've
right?
seen that right here. In our family, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. We're experiencing that. And we're experiencing that not just in our family, we're experiencing that in how we relate to our larger community. Mm. So in the last year, right, as we have done our healing and felt stronger and more whole, more connected to one another, I would say that there's in myself been almost like even a craving to connect to a larger community. Like, oh, like let's expand our community, let's reach people, because the connection and the availability of healthy connection, starting within oneself, feels so good and so motivating. If we can imagine a world where people are coming from that place, like I genuinely just want to be connected to other people, really like feel them and understand them, and then naturally leads to empathy and to helping other people. That's the better world.
Yeah.
I truly believe that connection is the medicine.
Yeah, you do.
And removing these barriers to connection, removing the trauma and the fear that it creates, removing the addiction. That's all causes disconnection. Right? You heal that up and you remove that, and now this connectivity. I mean, why is it that everybody just has to have a cell phone, right? Because we crave connection.
Yeah.
We crave connectivity.
And they've made it addictive. And
Well,
it's a thing that, that's a very difficult addiction to deal with. It's something that you hold in your hand that is very beneficial in a lot of ways. There is, connection, and it's also engineered to addict us, the social media.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other rabbit hole, and especially when it's hitting on people's insecurities. The addictive piece often comes with actually inspiring negative mood states.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about here is real, true healthy interpersonal connection that is mutually satisfying, is mutually beneficial, that is based on good feeling.
And it can happen quickly. One thing that I've also noticed is, I think both of us have had significant healings, and we're not trying to pose ourselves as gurus or anything, but we all are pretty honest reporters of our experience, is that the level of connection that you can get to quickly with somebody is, well, just that you can get to this level of connection very quickly. Right. And so I've found it in my life, and I've seen in your life, that we're meeting people and deeply dropping in, and all of a sudden having like real friendships with people we haven't known that long.
Yeah. And that has everything to do with, this concept of neuro leadership, and really deciding that we're going to take radical responsibility for our own healing and for our relationship, as we said from the outset, to be based on us supporting one another in our healing process. So it's really, it's a really interesting thing to wake up on the daily, open the eyes where your head is still on the pillow, and have the thought, oh yeah, I've had an awesome life.
Yeah.
I have an amazing life. And that's almost regardless of circumstances. So circumstances could change, right? Something, quote unquote bad could happen. But the way that we're relating to life is so different that the whole experience is different, right? So it's kind of like, okay, life, bring it on.
Well, it's, getting back and beating a dead horse here with the hero's journey, but it is true, because you can have the experience of a difficult time period in the middle of an incredible life. So your sister died from heroin. Your brother right now is kind of fighting for a new life. How does this moment feel to you?
Incredibly hopeful. Yeah, the most hopeful that I've ever experienced. And for anyone watching this, I feel like that is the main message that I would wish to convey, is that there's hope. There's hope. It's a one thing to reach out to your family member and offer them help with the solutions that we currently have, residential treatment or some new more psych meds or something like that, right? AA or NA, and all of those things have their place. But time has shown us that they're not enough. And when you know that when you're trying to support a family member and show up as an ally for a family member, you know that the numbers are not in your favor. You know that it is going to be extremely difficult for them to overcome the addiction. And that's changed. That is changing. We had the experience of speaking to my brother and telling him about Ibogaine. The ability to say truthfully, hey, Justy, there's something that can help. You don't have to continue to suffer in this way. And the way that he responded to that was like, I don't want to speak for him. I can only say that my experience of how he responded to that was like, hallelujah. Like, this sounds great. Yes, please. I want off this ride.
Yeah, and I think in communicating to him, to be able to say, because he's been through this before, he's gotten sober and
many
all that.
times, yeah.
And what happens when you've blown out your neurotransmitters with all these drugs is you're in this depleted state of basically depression for potentially multiple years while you're trying to change your patterns and change your life. And to be able to say to him, what is different this time is when you start to work on it, you're not going to be under this gloom that you know so well. And I got the sense too, I can't speak for him, but I got the sense that was like a relief, like that, so even for people that have, oftentimes people are trying multiple times to get sober or whatever. And even if they've had an experience or they just like, I just can't do it, you can say, well, there's a new framework here. Yeah. There's a new brain that you can have while you're going through and doing your work to make your life better.
Right. Because what the offer of recovery can sound like to many people, and if not most, is, okay, you're going to have a period of extended suffering with no relief.
Yes.
And that's what you have to sign up for in order to, maybe have a chance at a different life. And that is not the conversation that we had. The conversation that we had was, you don't have to suffer. You can enter into recovery in a way now that will eliminate the extended period of suffering without relief, and you'll be able to start anew in the immediate sense. And I, regardless of the outcomes with my brother, which I'm extremely hopeful about, but regardless of, we're going to play that all out, we're going to show up as allies in the best way that we can. I've already started to make changes in how I show up, right? And how I relate to this. So we're going to use it to evolve ourselves and to grow ourselves. And there is a treatment now and a medicine now that can save millions and millions and millions of lives. Not just save and live in some kind of low-level capacity, but radically alter the capacity for being able to be healed, to be well, to be loving, to be productive. All the things that family members and loved ones want for the person that's in addiction. As with my brother, many times we see that people who fall into addiction are very intelligent, very sensitive, loving people. And that doesn't change. Like, that is still who they are underneath the addiction. And we want that to be released into all of that loving capacity to be released into the world. We, as their family members, we see that, right? We want their unique spirit and their unique being to actually be alive and well and engaged in the world, and for them not to be in pain. And so I couldn't be more hopeful. I couldn't be more grateful. I've had many wonderful Christmases, but after not knowing if my brother was alive or dead for several months, I can easily say this was the best holiday season. This was the best Christmas that I've ever had. And the hope that I have for my family and for my brother, I really just, my intention is for that to radiate out to others who can hear this message and to know that this is on the way.
Yeah, amazing. And, I would just like to make the point that those people deserve a happy life.
Absolutely.
And, if you know anything about the stats, you know that people who are addicted in this way have been highly traumatized. Yeah. Whether or not they even know it, it's almost a virtual certainty based on stats. And they are our fathers, mothers, loved ones, our brothers, the people that we know. They deserve a happy life. They deserve to fulfill their purpose in life. And this is something potentially that can help to make that happen. So, what a blessing to, be on this ride with you and to be aligned on this mission and to be going at it from different approaches, but fully supported and loved and held. And I'm so blessed to have you in my life.
Oh, me too. I love you so much. Yeah, this has been an amazing experience. For me personally, in terms of, I'm a pretty spiritual person, and it's like my soul is having these experiences too. And I just feel like what's happening in our life will live on with me, my soul, for eternity. Yeah. It's really that extraordinary, it's that extraordinary. And for me to, I've said to you before that before I did Ibogaine, before I knew about it, my capacity to be in allyship, with my brother, and with others was not what it is now.
And with yourself.
And with myself. Well, that's where it starts, right? And now that I'm more fully in allyship with myself and in the context of our relationship, which is, phenomenal for me, all of a sudden I have this capacity to be in allyship and to be in support in ways that, number one, don't deplete me. They actually fill me. That I can lean into the parts of it that are scary, because I know that that's where change is possible, primarily for myself. And to realize my own potential in that way, and to have my brother be really, I think, the first person that we're going to support through this process is a dream come true. Just literally a dream come true. And I know that other people who have loved ones who are struggling with addiction or struggling with addiction themselves understands what that means. You dream of the day when the addiction is over. You dream about that. And we're on the precipice, and we're doing it. We're doing it together, and we're learning so much as we go. We've made a commitment that regardless of the outcomes, which we are not attached to, that we are students of this process, that we're learning what it means to bring someone towards a treatment that can truly resolve the addiction, give them the opportunity to really resolve the addiction. What does that actually mean? And how do we show up to that? I'm looking forward to the day when we hopefully will be able to help other families to go through this process. And that will be, I could die happy then. No plans. But.
Yeah, and to say that, to close, we are about being a benefit to this, and if anybody wants to leave a comment, direct message me in any way, any help that we can offer, we are happy to offer. We will be making more content about the experience with Justin, and hopefully that'll be a benefit to other families that are trying to support their loved ones or people that just want to support themselves. And it's New Year's Eve, and we're going to go and have an awesome dinner with our friends Lauren and Brian Hauser and Samantha Warren and Kurt, and then go see Polish Ambassador with the whole Boulder community here in Boulder. So we're going to get on that, sign off to this thing, and see you next time. Love you.
Love you, honey.
Thank you so much for joining the Neuro's Journey podcast. If this episode landed, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The real medicine is in the connection, and this community only grows when we reach for each other. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming, and if you have a minute, leaving a rating really helps more people find this work. And keep showing up for your own journey. Every small act of courage matters, for you, for the people around you, and for all of us. I am so grateful to be walking this path with you.